Darkness is not the enemy. It is not something to flee from or fear. In the moments when the lights go out, when silence surrounds you, and when the world feels distant, there is a strange presence, an invitation to look inward. Darkness is where the mind stops running, where the soul pauses, and where truths too subtle for the day can finally be seen. If we learn to embrace it, darkness becomes not a threat, but a friend that teaches, reveals, and transforms. Darkness has a way of revealing what the light cannot show. In the brightness of day, distractions, noise, and obligations occupy the mind, leaving little room to notice the subtle truths within. When the lights dim and the world quiets, hidden thoughts, suppressed emotions, and unacknowledged fears rise to the surface. The mind is no longer able to escape into activity, and the soul is confronted with what has been ignored. In the stillness of darkness, the mind becomes a mirror reflecting its own state. Every unresolved tension, every buried desire, and every unexamined habit appears with startling clarity. There is no place to hide, no one to impress, and no distractions to divert attention. This reflection is not a judgment, but an opportunity to see reality as it is, to recognize patterns and tendencies that have shaped life unconsciously. Darkness forces honesty. It is easy to deceive oneself in the chaos of day, but when night comes, pretenses fall away. The illusions we maintain, the roles we play, and the masks we wear are stripped bare. In this confrontation, the self is revealed, both its shadows and its strengths. Understanding emerges not from the noise of activity, but from the calm reflection that darkness provides. Observing oneself in darkness fosters awareness and self-mastery. When the hidden corners of the mind are brought into consciousness, they lose their power over behavior and thought. The awareness gained allows one to choose actions rather than react unconsciously, to release patterns that no longer serve, and to cultivate habits that align with deeper purpose. The mirror of darkness becomes a guide, showing the way toward inner clarity and freedom. Embracing darkness as a mirror transforms fear into insight. What initially seems threatening reveals itself to be an ally in self-discovery. By facing the hidden aspects of mind and emotion, a person becomes whole, integrating light and shadow into a coherent understanding of self. Darkness is no longer something to flee from, but a space where truth, awareness, and personal growth are born. Darkness naturally slows the mind because it removes the constant visual distractions of the day. In the absence of light, there is no rush to act, no immediate demand pulling attention in every direction. The mind, which is usually busy chasing thoughts, planning, and reacting, is forced into quiet. This quiet is not emptiness, it is a fertile space where clarity can arise and the noise of habitual distraction fades. In this stillness, awareness deepens. Without the interruptions of external stimuli, the mind begins to notice subtle patterns in thought and emotion. It observes how often attention jumps, how easily restlessness arises, and how much of daily life is consumed by unnecessary business. Stillness allows these patterns to surface so they can be understood, examined, and transformed. The body too responds to this quiet. Muscles release tension, breathing slows, and energy is restored. The absence of constant activity creates alignment between mind and body, producing a sense of balance and calm. In these moments, even simple sensations, like the rhythm of breath or the pulse of life, become vivid, grounding a person in the present rather than lost in the distraction of endless doing. Stillness in darkness nurtures patience and presence. When action is not demanded and there is no pressure to perform, the mind learns to linger with experience rather than flee from it. This lingering builds resilience, strengthens focus, and allows insight to emerge naturally. Decisions made after observing in stillness are clearer, more intentional, and aligned with purpose rather than reaction. Embracing the stillness that darkness offers transforms perception of life itself. What was once seen as emptiness or fear becomes a teacher and a companion. The calm that emerges shows that clarity, creativity, and understanding do not come from constant motion, but from the spaces where the mind is allowed to settle, reflect, and simply be. In these moments, stillness itself becomes a source of guidance and strength. Fear of darkness is rarely about the darkness itself, it is fear of the unknown, the uncertainty that lies beyond immediate perception. When the light disappears, the mind imagines dangers, gaps, and threats that may not exist. This imagined threat dominates thought, creating tension, anxiety, and avoidance. Most people flee from darkness not because it is dangerous, but because the mind cannot predict what it contains. Fear is a story the mind tells itself. It assigns meaning to shadows, gives form to emptiness, and inflates the significance of absence. The more attention is paid to these stories, the larger fear becomes and the more it controls behavior. Yet these fears have no power in themselves, they only exist as long as the mind believes in them. Observing fear without reacting to it reveals its illusory nature and begins to dissolve its hold. Facing the unknown is a form of courage, not through grand gestures but through conscious presence. When a person allows themselves to exist in darkness without running, the mind adjusts. Anxiety settles, the body relaxes, and perception sharpens. In these moments, awareness emerges because the mind is no longer consumed by imagined threats and can see reality clearly. Courage is born not from removing fear, but from standing with it. Fear, when understood, becomes a teacher. It points toward the edges of comfort and invites growth. By confronting what is unfamiliar, the mind learns to adapt, the heart learns to trust, and the spirit gains resilience. Each encounter with fear strengthens clarity, patience, and self-knowledge. What was once paralyzing becomes a guide, illuminating areas of life that require attention and presence. The transformation of fear into understanding allows wisdom to arise. Darkness stops being a threat and becomes a space for discovery, reflection, and insight. Courage emerges naturally when fear is met rather than avoided, and the unknown becomes a companion rather than an enemy. In this way, fear itself becomes a doorway leading to awareness, clarity, and deeper understanding of oneself and the world. Darkness creates a space where the mind can turn inward, away from the endless demands and distractions of the external world. In the quiet of absence, there is nothing to capture attention but the self, and the mind is forced to explore its own depths. This exploration reveals patterns, thoughts, and emotions that are normally ignored, overlooked, or suppressed in the light of constant activity. Turning inward in darkness exposes both strength and vulnerability. The mind encounters fears, doubts, and unresolved conflicts, but it also discovers resilience, clarity, and untapped potential. Without external stimuli to distract it, the mind learns to observe rather than react, and insight arises from understanding rather than from hurried action. Each encounter with the inner self deepens awareness and strengthens presence. The inner journey nurtures creativity and imagination. Freed from the noise of the outside world, the mind begins to wander, connect ideas, and perceive possibilities that are otherwise blocked by routine and obligation. In this stillness, inspiration arises naturally, as the mind is not forced to chase or achieve, but simply allowed to explore and reflect. Introspection in darkness also fosters personal growth. By examining thoughts, emotions, and motivations, a person gains perspective and clarity. Patterns of behavior that were unconscious become visible, and choices that were automatic can be consciously considered. This inner work transforms understanding into action. allowing life to be guided by purpose rather than impulse. The inner journey through darkness ultimately cultivates self-mastery. By facing the mind fully and exploring its depths without fear or avoidance, a person builds resilience, awareness and clarity. Darkness is no longer an external challenge, but a companion that illuminates the inner landscape, guiding toward insight, strength, and the deeper understanding of one's own being. Darkness strips away the illusions of control and certainty, leaving the mind and heart exposed. In this exposure, the familiar defenses crumble and a person feels small, fragile and open. Most people resist this sensation, believing that vulnerability is weakness. Yet it is precisely in these moments of openness that true awareness and growth can begin. Facing vulnerability requires courage because it demands honest recognition of one's limitations, fears and uncertainties. When the mind is no longer shielded by distractions or pretense, it is confronted with the raw reality of its own nature. Accepting this exposure allows a person to experience life more fully, with clarity and authenticity, rather than through the veil of constant protection or denial. Vulnerability in darkness is not passive. It is an active engagement with oneself. By observing the discomfort, the fears and the insecurities that arise, a person gains insight into the patterns that govern thought and behavior. Awareness deepens and the mind becomes capable of responding intentionally rather than reacting automatically. Strength grows from facing what was once avoided. The acceptance of vulnerability builds resilience. Every moment of openness, every confrontation with fear or uncertainty strengthens the inner core. The mind learns that discomfort is temporary, that exposure does not destroy, and that the self is larger and more capable than previously imagined. Through this process, inner power is cultivated quietly and steadily, without the need for external validation or recognition. Embracing vulnerability transforms perception of self and the world. Darkness ceases to be threatening because it becomes a space for honest reflection, growth and empowerment. The smallness once felt in exposure turns into awareness of one's depth and potential. Through vulnerability, the mind, heart and spirit become aligned and the individual learns to navigate life with courage, clarity and strength. In the light of day, the mind is constantly distracted by appearances. Colors, shapes, movement and noise bombard perception, and the truth beneath the surface often goes unnoticed. People are trained to respond to what is visible, obvious and immediate, but these things rarely reflect reality. Most of life remains hidden beneath the layers of superficiality, and the mind becomes accustomed to mistaking appearances for truth. Darkness removes these distractions. When the senses are quieted and the external world fades, perception shifts inward. Without constant visual stimulation, the mind begins to notice subtleties, patterns and connections that were previously invisible. It becomes possible to sense the essence of things rather than their surface, to understand what truly matters instead of being drawn into illusions. Seeing beyond appearances requires attention and clarity. It is not simply observation, but a deep awareness that penetrates layers of habitual perception. In darkness, the mind is forced to rely on intuition, insight and subtle perception rather than external confirmation. This strengthens the ability to discern truth from illusion, allowing a person to act with intention rather than react to appearances. This process also reveals the hidden dimensions of oneself. Many habits, desires and fears exist unseen because they are masked by outward activity and distractions. In darkness, the mind is exposed to its own inner realities and illusions about the self fall away. Understanding what is real internally creates alignment and allows choices to emerge from truth rather than from pretense or habit. By learning to see beyond appearances, the mind gains depth, clarity and insight. Darkness becomes a tool to strip away the unnecessary, revealing the essential. What once seemed chaotic, confusing or opaque becomes clear and comprehensible. This ability to perceive beyond the surface transforms life into a conscious engagement with reality rather than a reaction to illusions, creating presence, wisdom and understanding. Darkness creates the conditions for reflection that the business of life rarely allows. In the quiet and absence of external distraction, the mind can revisit past actions, decisions and experiences with clarity. It becomes possible to examine mistakes, regrets and unresolved conflicts without the urgency of the day pressing in. This reflection is not self-judgment but honest observation, allowing understanding to replace confusion. Processing past experiences in darkness allows emotions that were buried or ignored to surface. Grief, anger, disappointment and fear can be felt fully, acknowledged and released. Suppressed emotions often fester unnoticed during the day, shaping thought and behavior unconsciously. By facing these emotions in stillness, the mind begins to cleanse itself and the burden that weighs on the heart starts to lift. Forgiveness naturally emerges through reflection. Darkness allows a person to look inward and recognize the shared humanity in their own mistakes and the mistakes of others. When the mind sees clearly, resentment, blame and attachment lose their grip. Forgiveness is not an act of weakness, but an act of understanding and liberation, freeing both the heart and the mind from chains that have long restricted growth. Reflection in darkness also clarifies choices for the future. By understanding past patterns, successes and failures, a person can make better decisions moving forward. The mind learns from experience, not through constant action, but through conscious observation. Each insight gained strengthens awareness and guides intentional action, ensuring that the next steps are aligned with clarity rather than reaction. Healing through reflection transforms darkness into a restorative force. What initially seemed heavy or frightening becomes a space of learning, forgiveness and renewal. The mind and heart release their burdens and the individual emerges with insight, resilience and a deeper sense of self. Darkness, once feared, becomes a companion that nurtures understanding, balance and the quiet power of restoration. Darkness removes the constant bombardment of sights, sounds and demands that occupy the mind during the day. Without external stimulation, the mind is freed from the habitual patterns of thought that limit imagination. In the absence of distraction, creativity naturally begins to surface, arising from the depths of consciousness rather than being forced by circumstance or obligation. The mind in darkness begins to wander freely. Ideas, possibilities and connections emerge that are usually blocked by the rigidity of daylight schedules and responsibilities. The brain, unoccupied by urgent tasks, can experiment, combine seemingly unrelated concepts and perceive patterns that were previously invisible. This unstructured exploration is the fertile ground in which original thought and innovation take root. Darkness also encourages introspection, which is essential for creative insight. Without the need to react or perform, the mind can reflect on experience, memory and emotion. These reflections are processed quietly, allowing associations and interpretations to form that are both deep and novel. Many of the breakthroughs in understanding artistry or invention arise not from effortful thinking, but from this natural, patient process of inner exploration. Freedom from external distraction nurtures intuition. When the mind is not overburdened by constant input, subtle impulses and imaginative sparks are noticed and developed. Thoughts that might be dismissed or overlooked in the brightness of day gain space to grow, revealing solutions, perspectives and expressions that feel original, inspired and authentic. The mind learns to trust its inner guidance as it navigates creative possibilities. Through this process, darkness transforms from a void into a source of inspiration. It creates a safe environment for experimentation, reflection, and self-expression. Imagination flourishes, originality emerges, and the mind discovers resources within itself that remain hidden in constant light. Creativity becomes not just a product of skill or effort, but a natural expression of awareness cultivated in the quiet and depth of darkness. Darkness removes the noise of the outside world, leaving the mind and heart alone with themselves. There are no demands, no expectations, and no one to impress. In this solitude, the distractions that usually occupy attention fade, and the individual is confronted with their own presence in its raw, unfiltered form. Being alone in darkness allows for honest observation. Thoughts, emotions and impulses that are normally masked or ignored become visible. Without the pressure to perform or conform, the mind can examine itself freely, noticing patterns, tendencies and desires that were previously hidden beneath habitual behavior. This clarity forms the foundation for a deeper understanding of self. Connection with oneself in darkness fosters authenticity. Freed from judgment, comparison and expectation, a person can explore their true inclinations and values. Choices, ideas and intentions emerge from inner awareness rather than external influence, revealing the essence of identity and guiding the individual toward actions that resonate with their core. This self-connection also strengthens inner guidance. By observing thoughts and feelings without distraction, the mind learns to discern between impulse and insight, fear and wisdom, reaction and intention. Decisions become more aligned with authentic purpose, and the individual gains confidence in navigating life from a grounded sense of self rather than a reactive state. Through sustained presence in darkness, the bond with oneself deepens. The individual becomes comfortable with silence, solitude and inner observation. This connection nurtures clarity, resilience and self-reliance. Darkness becomes not a space of emptiness or fear, but a sanctuary where the mind, heart and spirit meet fully, honestly and without compromise. Acceptance begins when a person stops resisting what is present and allows themselves to exist fully in the moment, even if it is uncomfortable or uncertain. Darkness, when met without struggle, ceases to be an enemy. The mind stops fighting against the unknown, and energy that was previously spent on resistance becomes available for observation, understanding and growth. Through acceptance, fear loses its control. When the mind no longer battles darkness, anxiety and tension dissolve naturally. The unknown becomes familiar, and the person learns that what once seemed threatening is simply a space to explore and understand. Fear transforms into awareness, revealing insights and strengths that could not emerge in constant avoidance. Restlessness softens in the presence of acceptance. The compulsive need to act, to change or to escape diminishes. The mind settles, attention deepens and stillness emerges. This stillness is not passive emptiness but a state of alert presence where every thought, feeling and perception is observed clearly and without judgment. Darkness is not a void, it is a teacher. It asks us to stop running, to stop seeking and to face what has always been within. When we embrace darkness as a friend, we discover the strength, clarity and depth that daylight alone cannot give. We learn that light is only part of life's rhythm, and true wisdom emerges when we walk willingly into the spaces where fear once ruled and presence alone remains.